Hey there, let's talk about some hobby goals. This isn't exactly my usual format of video, but I wanted to talk a little bit today about hobby goals and like why New Year's resolutions never seem to stick, at least for me, and why I try to shy away from them. Hopefully, if I can remain coherent in my ramblings here, I can relate a little bit of wisdom about what works for me when I'm setting goals, and then talk a little bit about what my hobby goals are for 2024, and let you know a little bit of what's going on with the channel. So first of all, why do New Year's resolutions suck? Well, the main thing is it always feels like you're doing it for somebody else, and then you're given an easy way out right when you start to get bored of it. See, I realized if there's something that I want to change about my life, I want to start right away. I need to start now, or at least as soon as my schedule can accommodate that sort of change. I need to start by knowing that whatever change I want to make, it is worth doing now and worth doing for myself. If I'm going to wait for an arbitrary date marker that has been decided on by other people or society at large, I've already failed myself and my reason for making goals by deciding that it's not important for me. It's important because I'm trying to impress somebody else. And I've told myself that somebody else's timeline is worth more than my timeline by saying I'm going to do it based on their date. And then you talk about the boredom part, everybody starts quitting all their New Year's resolutions all around the same time, and now you're not going to feel so guilty. You know, everybody else is doing it. You can't give me any flack for not sticking to my goals or my resolution. So, you know, I just pick a start date somewhere in the near future of my life when I have a goal that I want to achieve. And I've been working on trying to make it so that that date is far enough out that I have had enough time to do a little bit of research about what I want to pursue, but not so much time that I get stuck in analysis paralysis or start insisting to myself that I need to learn everything about it. You know, at some point you need to just start. So that's my big thing. If you want to change something, do it right now. Otherwise, you've already made the decision that it's not worth doing it at all. Of course, there's 3,000,001 other productivity tips and stuff like that that can help as well. I've managed to retain a few, and let me relay a couple of them to you. The first thing is make sure that you're setting goals, not like resolutions or not punishments. You need to make a positive change, not a negative one. I don't want to stop doing something or start missing out on something. I want to replace it with something better. Like, I don't want to lose weight. I want to eat healthier and be healthier, which shifts it from like, I have to stop eating the sugary things I like and I have to stop doing the things I enjoy. It's more like I have to start finding healthy things that I do enjoy. And that replacement is going to be a lot easier than just saying, no, bad Shane, you're not allowed. I don't want to force myself to stop being such a spendthrift. I don't want to just like flog myself and beat myself over the head and become this complete hermit where I just don't do anything for myself ever and don't buy anything for myself ever. Instead, what I want to do is I want to change from buying new shiny and buying something that interests me in the moment and kind of shift towards buying something that will help me finish a goal, help me finish a project, help me finish painting a mini, building a kit bash, making a piece of terrain. Because instead of growing the pile of shame, now I'm shifting to growing my pile of finished projects and things that I can be proud of. And of course, these positive goals tend to be more concrete and measurable, which is really important because goals without deadlines are just wishes. It's a silly, trite phrase that I heard a few years ago that I've tried to retain because it is very true. This is why I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions. I did find it in this instance to be a good marker for the start of the year because I made these decisions in the beginning of December anyway. So it was as good a marker as any for me to take a month, look back, see what I really wanted to do with myself, see what my goals were going to be, and move forward after a little period of rest and reflection. But if it hadn't been in December, then I would have had to pick some other easily memorable date because otherwise I'm never going to remember when I started this list. The memory is not there and I can't write it down because then that notebook's going to go missing. So tying it to an important date would be great. Your birthday, a work anniversary, a minor holiday, a banker holiday, as long as it's just something where you can say, oh yeah, I started that on Memorial Day last year. It's just a little bit easier marker to remember. Either way, I want to set a goal that says that this is where I want to be at this time next year, not something that's like, I need to wake up tomorrow and be a completely different person. I know I've never eaten a completely gluten-free diet, but tomorrow I'm a different person and I must do it 100% or fail. I know I've never been a person to go to the gym 4 days a week, but if I don't start right now and go full bore, I'm going to fail. No, I want a goal that means that I can make consistent progress and make little improvements and small changes and get there by this time next year. But of course you need plans to do that, but that's fine because you take a goal, you give it a deadline, and then you break it down into actionable steps, and then you have a plan. So here's the real thing to do first. Write down the goals and then write down the first steps. Here's my goals. I want to get better at YouTube. The marker I've set for success is 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It's a fairly simple number to hit. I'm starting the year at 450, and as of the time that I release this video, I will be at whatever this number is right here. It's 481 today, so I imagine I'll be closing in on 500 in a few days by the time I finish this edit. But while this is a relatively modest goal, I've also done something else by linking internal and external motivation, because 1,000 subscribers is, of course, when YouTube lets you start monetizing. So in addition to having my personal reasons for just wanting to use that as a marker to say, well, I have gotten better at my video production value, I have gotten better at relaying information, I have gotten better at producing quality content, I also have the external motivation from a third party that's saying, yes, you've crossed this goal into this new threshold. So tying internal and external when you can is helpful, can be helpful. And my plan continues to be small improvements. A lot of it's about finishing projects though. I'm really bad at finishing projects. I've got 1,000,001 projects around at all times. I need to get better at just finishing them, and I need to get better at filming them. And certain ones are going to show up here on the channel. Anything that I feel is, any sort of interesting, or that I might have some cool hobby tips and tricks or ideas to share within the build. I'm going to be painting a lot of gray Carcharodon Space Marines this year. They don't need a video, and I'm not a great painter anyway. If anything, you might get a few decent videos out of me on a good technique for speed painting so that you don't waste too much time getting like tabletop ready results. In fact, speaking about finishing projects, I did notice while I was writing this script that that's really a thread and a theme that has infused itself into all my other goals. I kind of took that also as a good test for the fact that my goals kind of are in line with each other. They synergize with each other. It's not something that I intended when I was writing these goals, but now moving forward, it's something that I'm going to keep in mind when I write goals in the future, because if they mesh together and there is some sort of greater theme that they can help accomplish, then every little success is going to build on each other much quicker than several disparate individual goals. But I digress from all of that. I'm going to improve my audio quality, my video quality. I'm going to work on all of these new projects. I'm going to work on my lighting. By the way, my next video is a speed paint video for my yellow Badab War veteran Carcharodons. This is what they're looking like so far. That video is in the edit stages, so I should have it out relatively soon. But let me show you a little bit of what I've started doing to facilitate me engrossing myself more and more often into the arts and crafts aspect of my life and into getting more work done. I doubled the size of my craft room. So originally we had the sewing room over here, and it was the smallest room in the house, but now we have expanded to this much larger area. I have got separate stations set up for many different things. I've got key lights. I've got sharks hanging from the ceiling. I've got a bunch of amps set up so I can actually play music. I've got my 3D printer that I just recently picked up. I've got the editing station. I've got the painting station. My wife's got her Cricut and sewing machine set all up. The point is that I am reducing friction so that I can do things easier and I can move between tasks easier. And let me tell you, learning to reduce friction between me and the things that I want and increase resistance between me and the things that I don't want has been a big standout in me learning how to improve my habits over the last couple of years. But I'm still not great at good habits, and that would be a topic for an entire video on its own anyway. If y'all even like this format of video, let me know. Maybe I can make that one in the future. My next goal is to paint 3,000 points of a Carcharodon army. Now, my latest army is a Loyalist Space Marine army, my chosen chapter being the Space Sharks. These yellow Marines that are in my next video are veterans of the Badab War, and they're the start of this project. And this is a really good example of breaking down a goal into constituent parts or attainable goals, because Me personally, I know that if I sit here and say, I want to have 3,000 points of Marines painted by this time next year, what I'm going to do is 10 months from now or 11 months from now, I'm going to be looking at still needing to paint 2,800 points of Marines, and I'll be heading into the holiday season as a retail manager where I'm not going to get to see a hobby station for 2 months. But instead of saying 3,000 points and leaving it at that, I decided to break it up into 10 installments, and so I give myself 300 points a month to achieve, and I have 2 buffer months, and 300 points is way easier. That's 1 or 2 units and a character model. While that's kind of at the boundary of my level of like skill and devotion and all that right now, pushing those boundaries is only going to help me improve anyway, and it's going to help me power through getting this army painted. I'm really looking for tabletop standard. I'm not going crazy. Again, not the painter you want to follow for painting tips. Another one of my big goals is to learn how to 3D sculpt and to kind of get together my workflow for that process so that I can continue developing it in the future. I recently broke down and I bought myself a 3D printer, but I have never been a big digital world guy, and I've never been hugely motivated to get into 3D printing. So while I'm going to print a few figures, most of what I'm doing is not to buy and print figures with the 3D printer as much as it is to utilize it for rare bits. If I need a specific weapon to finish a kit bash or something like that, that's where I'm going. I might do some terrain embellishments, things like that. But either way, I want to learn how to do some 3D sculpting so that I can create something and then bring it into the real world. Now, so far, I've already kind of started getting the workflow down, but now that I've got those broad strokes hammered out, I can really just work on practicing the 3D sculpting while I'm like sitting around watching TV, doing my lazy evening time. It's not necessarily a goal where I have to be like, I need to be at this particular point by this time, as much as I just wanted to be comfortable with it and I want to become more proficient in it. My last goal is that I really want to release my own skirmish game. Not a big one. I do have a dream in the future of releasing war games. I want to write rule sets and I want to release a couple of games. I have a few like really unique settings and strange stories that I want to tell through the medium of gaming, and I've always loved the world building aspect of reading through a rule book and seeing how the story comes together and how it plays out in a physical game mechanic. And the various titles that I've got in mind that I want to work on, they're just things that I don't see being replicants of things that are already on the market. So at some point I'd hope to release them, under no delusion that I'm going to get rich from this. I want to create these things. These are things that I've always wanted to make. I want to take and learn that whole process start to finish. So this year, I am going to write a skirmish game, and then by the end of the year, I want to have a downloadable PDF that I can share to all of you, and then maybe you can give me some feedback and we can make a few tweaks. Maybe next year I could make a hard copy rulebook available. Once I have a complete rule set, it's not that difficult of a leap to make into a physical copy, but I want to get some playtesting in and some feedback first before we get to that point. But once I've done it once, it's easier to do it again. I'm a big fan of iteration. If I just kind of always do 40% of something, I'm always going to get stuck at that, and I don't know what to do beyond the next step. And it makes that next step harder every time, because each time you have a more developed first 40% that needs to cross a barrier that you've never crossed. So if I do the whole thing A to Z, now I just have to do it again. Doing it again is easier. Doing it better the second time is easier. That's just what practice is. Repetition is the only way to learn anything. So this year is going to be the first repetition and the first iteration of me releasing a war game to the public. Now, if you're curious at this point in time what the game is, I'll start by saying that I got into this hobby of wargaming first through the hobby of model making, model cars, and especially 1/35th scale models. And I still love 1/35th scale military models. And so I'm writing a skirmish game based around kind of making war bands and trying to play a relatively quick game that you can get in a shorter amount of time than a lot of these skirmish games that can still take hours and hours. If you are familiar with the game Tonks by Apocrypha Now, which is an amazing game, and the old GW game Gorka Morka, it's going to be somewhere in the middle of those. The rule set is a little more similar to Tonks, but it is war bands along the lines of Gorka Morka and that kind of handful of models and a couple of light vehicles. Handy enough, 1/35th scale miniatures are just about the same size as Little Green Army Men, so I'm hoping that people are able to get into this game very, very cheaply with things that they can pick up from the dollar store and like Five Below and stuff like that. Maybe get into a starter game of this for under 20 bucks, probably even under 10 bucks, and then go into getting more involved models as time goes on if you're into it. But more updates to come on that when there are updates. Let me stop rambling on and just sum up my steps that I use for setting up hobby goals. How I set up my hobby goals for 2024 was taking some time to reflect on what I wanted to improve, making some positive goals instead of negative ones, making deadlines for the goals, breaking up the deadlines into actionable steps, pairing together internal and external motivation when I could, synergizing the newly added one, double check and see if everything works together or plays to a larger goal, and that will improve your overall quality of your goals, reduce friction between you and your goals, and then get started. And the goals that I made start with hitting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. You can help with that today by hitting the subscribe button and following along. Paint at 3,000 points at Carcharodons, learn 3D sculpting, set up a workflow for that, and write and release a skirmish game. And hey, maybe y'all can help me with some of these goals. I would love to get some feedback once I start releasing rules for the game. I would love it if you would let me know if this kind of format of video interests you from this channel, or if I should just shut up and get back to the crafting. Speaking of, I've got that video on speed painting some tabletop ready yellow marines coming very soon. The edit is in the works, but stick around if you want to see more, and click any of these links that are popping up now if you want to see any of the crafting projects that I've done in the past and managed to get into a finished state on this channel. Hopefully I'll be seeing you around.